right, well, welcome to the Victory Vision podcast. And we've had some requests to do some things that we've been doing in our church for couples in a couples class. We've gone through a series of maybe 10 or 12 lessons over the past several months. And people have asked they can get their hands on that material that maybe don't come to that class. So we thought maybe we would put it on the podcast and maybe that'd be something to help with. And this one is on communication. And this doesn't have to just be, you don't have to tune out if you say, well, I'm not married, I don't need this. This is these communication principles apply both to workplace, to friendships, but really they can really apply to relationships and marriage, with parents to children, things like that. So I'm going to go through some of these, and hopefully they'll be a help to you. And we've got some guys with us here, Brother Micaiah Young and Pastor Brett Bishop, some of the pastors here at our church. They're going to help us go through some of this and maybe give their input from their perspective of relationships and communication. So let's start with the first one. The first one is the principle. There are 7 principles. The first one is the principle of timing. And the principle that I would take this from would be from Ecclesiastes 3:1. It says, to everything there is a season and a time, to every purpose under the heaven. In verse number 7, a time to rend, a time to sow, a time to keep silence, and a time to speak. And so timing, the principle of timing. I have a few things we'll talk about under this first principle, but the first one is this: be intentional about spending time together talking. When we, it's worth saying, I was at a restaurant the other day, and I saw a family sitting at the restaurant, and there was a husband and a wife and a teenage daughter, and all 3 of them were on their phone, and nobody was talking at all. In fact, I don't think anybody talked through the entire meal other than just talking to the waitress for their order. Mm-hmm. And we live in a society today where people just don't talk. And we're texting each other, we're messaging each other, but we've lost the skills of looking each other in the eye and having a conversation. I found this interesting. The average couple spends only 20 minutes a week talking with each other, and that's sad that's the case. And so I wrote here, it'd be a good idea to spend 20 to 30 minutes at least a day trying to catch up with each other and spend time talking to each other. And I realized that when you have children, and there's all 3 variations here of this. When you have children, it's harder to spend time just talking. I know with our daughter, she's about to be 4. It seems like every time I start to have a conversation with my wife, my daughter will say, "Mommy" or "Daddy, can you look at this?" or "Can I, say this?" And so it begins to get harder to spend time in a conversation or something. But I'm saying try to be intentional about trying to make time to have a conversation with each other. My wife and I we don't do it as much anymore. We used to go for a walk every day. And in that walk, I would say, well, how was your day? And she, how was your day? We would spend time, trying to have a conversation with each other about things. And so I think it's important to try to spend time talking to each other. The other thing that's interesting here is I may represent like an older generation. Not that I'm old by any means, but I'm probably older. We've been talking about this lately about, I'm saying something about when I went in the Army or when this, and Brett has been like, yeah, I was in kindergarten when you were doing, and I'm thinking, man, I feel old. And then Micaiah wasn't even born yet when, a lot of that stuff. So we have 3 different, perspectives here of how people see communication. So what are y'all thoughts about what y'all see going on today with actually talking amongst each other and families and stuff?
Yeah, I know sometimes, like what Pastor was saying, when you have kids, it's really hard to have those times of communication and talking with each other, and even just the basic, hey, how you doing? How's your day? Being intentional, sometimes we will actually have to sit down and schedule a time to talk.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And one of the things we've learned recently is it's okay to schedule a time to talk, because if you don't, then you will lose that time because of the kids, because of the schedule, because of anything. One of the things, and we'll talk about it in a future point, but one of the things that we learned, and we never realized it until somebody told us, but there's really three types of conversations that we're trying to be intentional in having. And that first type of conversation was just a stress release, like, "Hey, how's your day? What happened, at work today?" And just having those general conversations. The other one, and this is really important, is the relationship building conversation. Like, "Hey, when you were growing up, what was your favorite color?" Right? Or just those things, so you can get to learn more about your wife or your husband, and you can start growing that relationship. But then the last one is, they called it the problem conversation, right? "Hey, I had this issue come up with the kids or with the family, or hey, at work, and we really need to discuss it." Now, they told us, and we've started doing this, is they said schedule one time a week to talk about all the problems. Because he says if you don't schedule the time, then all you're going to talk about are the problems, and you're going to miss out on being those intentional times of relationship building and just communication. And so, but intentionality is important, because as Pastor was saying, if we're not intentional to make time, the time's not going to be there.
Yeah.
Right. And I'd say for us, we don't have kids yet, but we're also, being millennials, we don't get distracted by the kids part, but we get distracted by the social media part and the phone part. And it's easy to get lazy in relationships, especially when you always know that person's going to be there.
Yeah.
And I think we even think that about God sometimes. Oh, he's always going to be there. I can pray whenever I want to. And we're not intentional about spending time with God because he's always there. And I think we get that in the same sense that when we're married, I've only been married 3 years, but I know that can kind of sneak up on me as being lazy, just showing up. Let's just sit on the couch. Let's just scroll. Let's just watch a movie. And when in reality, we should set some time apart. Hey, let's go out to dinner. Let's go talk. Let's go spend time together. Let's throw the phones down. Let's put them to the side, and let's be intentional about making this marriage work the greatest possible way, and actually not being lazy, but getting to know those people and communicating in those ways.
I'm glad we do it this way. This makes for such a better class or lesson when you have these different perspectives like this than it is just me communicating this. Because what you just said is extremely important. There's people that say, "Well, I spend time with my wife. I spend time with my family." Well, tell me what you're doing. Well, we're sitting in the house watching a movie together. Now, I'm not opposed to that.
Right.
But I'm just saying, being in the same geographic location with each other and everyone being in the same room is not intentional communication or a relationship building that we're talking about. Now, that may be a good thing to do, like a movie night with the family or something like that, but there needs to be some intentional time where we're actually communicating with each other, not just being in the same building, but spending time talking with each other. The next thing under this, the principle of timing, is this: knowing the right and the wrong time to speak. In Proverbs 13:3, it says, "He that keepeth his mouth keepeth his life, but he that openeth wide his lips shall have destruction." And so this is a very good point. It's worth kind of getting. We were having class of the day, and in that class time, one of the ladies said that they have something that works for their home. And she said what they do is, when her husband comes home, when he first comes home from a day of being out all day for the job, that they have worked out a system. And the system that works for them is they don't have any heavy communication about anything for 30 minutes. That's their cutoff, for at least 30 minutes for him to get in, change clothes, kind of decompress from what's going on, maybe get cleaned up a little bit, and then getting in some relaxing, attire for the day of spending time with the family. And then we can start having. So it isn't like I just walked in the door and you're like, "I'm glad you're here. I've been dealing with the kids all day, and this happened and that happened," and bam, you just walk right into a chaos. So they have something set up, and I thought, man, that is a really good idea. And it really goes into this thing of finding the right time to have a conversation about things and knowing when it's the right time to talk. Just after you say your spouse or you does the checkbook, just after they got through balancing the checkbook, and you can see on their face that they are like grieved heavily over the bottom line, and then you're like, hey, I can see you got the checkbook out and you're pulling your hair out. This is a great time for me to talk to you about the fact that I'd like to make this huge purchase. That's probably not the right timing to bring this stuff up. So just being intentional about talking and spending time, but also the right and the wrong times to speak.
Right. I would say, discernment. I was talking to somebody else about this the other day. Discernment is such a lost art of knowing when to say something, when to walk up. I know people personally. You'll be in a deep conversation with someone, and someone will just walk up and just stand there while you're having a conversation, and stand there until you acknowledge that they're there. And, having that discernment to know when to say something, when to show up. And what I've learned over my marriage, and I'm always, me being on this podcast does not mean that I've arrived by any means. But I know my wife, I thought I was a bad morning person. I love my wife to death, but she's not a morning person. And so to be discerning to say, okay, I need to talk to my wife about things, but I am not talking to her about them in the morning because I may not live the next day. And so discerning in that sense of, okay, I do need to talk to her about some things today, but I'm going to wait till lunchtime or I'm going to wait till different times because I know she's not going to be in the mood to talk about any of these things in the morning, just being discerning in that sense as well.
Yeah, I think we got a little sign next to the coffee pot in our house that says something about, don't speak to me before my first cup of coffee. It's something to that effect.
Right.
And that is exactly what we're talking about. And that's you learning, how it works with your spouse or whoever you're with. Of when's the right time to have these conversations? If they've had a bad day or a good day before or what the good time of the day before you really go into talking. And then which brings up when you said about awareness of kind of your surroundings of talking to people, that's the next thing underneath them is just kind of being aware of your surroundings and don't have like really difficult conversations in front of other people.
Yeah.
Have you ever been in a room with somebody while they're like a husband and wife is having like a deep, it's really something you're thinking that should be a conversation y'all have kind of in private.
Yeah.
You're kind of on the verge of arguing with each other, and I kind of feel like a fly on the wall. I really wish I could find a way to get out of here and let y'all have this conversation in private. Just kind of be aware of your surroundings and know, is this the right time to have that conversation?
Right.
This might not be the right timing for that.
Now, I would
or even with your kids around, that may be another thing.
With the kids, I would agree with that. But also, because in the restaurants nowadays, there are private areas. And part of me, because I've thought about this, if I have to have a difficult conversation with somebody, technically, right, and with discernment, they're not going to go crazy if we're out in public. And so, usually, right? Usually, a normal person isn't going to go crazy. So maybe sometimes finding a private area, but again, it's got to be private at a restaurant, out in public, where people are around, so that you can have that difficult. If somebody is maybe an angry person who is given to blow up at times, they're going to be less likely to do it in a restaurant. And so then maybe kind of utilizing those places, again, not in the midst of a party room with everybody sitting around you. That's not right. But a private area, separated, but still kind of out in public, where there other people are watching. And so I've done that. I've had to do that once before, having a difficult conversation with not with my wife, but with a friend. And
so if you invite me out to a restaurant in a public place and you need to talk, it's because it's going to be a difficult.
And especially if I say, "Hey, can we have the private room?"
Yes,
please?
We know it's something difficult you're going to talk to him about.
Something difficult, yes.
All right. Well, our second point, that's the principle of timing. Our second principle is speaking truth, and this is going to be a good one to kind of dig through. Is speaking truth. In Ephesians 4:15, it says, "But speaking the truth in love may grow up into him in all things, which is the head, even Christ." So it's the principle of when you're going to speak to somebody, even if you have to speak about something that's hard, make sure you're doing it in the right spirit. Make sure you've got the right way that you're communicating to them. And so let me say this: speaking the truth. The first thing I want to say underneath the speaking the truth is, sometimes you have to actually speak what is the truth, what is going on with you. Don't just assume that the person, your friend or your spouse or your coworker or whatever, don't just assume that they should know what you're dealing with or what's going on with you. Don't just assume they should know. So you're mad at them, and you're grumpy or you're whatever, and you've never communicated to them what it is that you're having a problem with. Well, that isn't very fair. Don't assume that people are mind readers. Don't assume that because you slam the door, or because you throw the pillows, or because you slam the cabinets, or you're putting the dishes away really hard, that is communication. That's not good communication. Tell them what's going on, what you're having trouble with. Make sure you're speaking what is the truth. But when you do tell them, when you do finally speak it, do it in love. Tell them what you need to tell them, but do it in a kind way. Tact is great. Remember when Nathan went to David, and Nathan had to drop a truth bomb on him that was going to be pretty tough. Remember, he gets to the end of the whole speech and he's saying, "Thou art the man." Mm-hmm. And in that communication, remember how he did it? He started off with, "So, hey, David, let me put it this way. David, you got a minute? Yeah. All right, let me tell you a story about a man with a lamb." And he kind of goes through this thing about a sheep, and you know what he's doing the whole time is he's softening the blow, he's working it, he's spinning tact. I call it the sandwich technique of, we always joke about it here of, something kind, then the meat of what you want to say, and something kind again. But it's speaking the truth, but you're doing it in a loving way, of kind of getting to the point of what it is, and being tactful about the way you do it. And the other thing in there is, and feel free to chime in at any time in this, but the other one is, if you're speaking the truth. Speaking the truth. So one is, you've got to speak. Don't just assume they know. The other one is, when you speak, it needs to be in love. And then the other part is speaking the truth. And a lot of people, this is where a lot of communication breaks down, is we deal in feelings rather than facts. There's a lot of people that they get all messed up over how they feel about what's going on, instead of the facts of what's going on. How they feel about what their spouse has done, instead of what the facts are about it. Philippians 4:8 says, "Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are true, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of a good report, if there be any virtue, if there be any praise, think on these things." So things that are true, things that are honest, things that are just, a good report. We're supposed to be thinking on and speaking on things that are true. Not if we dwell too much on how we feel about it instead of what is actually true, we can get ourselves in a real mess sometimes with that. I don't know if y'all have had any experiences with that before. It depends on kind of the personality of who you're with. Some people are very black and white. They're very fact oriented. Other people, they deal less in the facts of what's going on and more of how things make them feel. And so I tell people this. If you are a feelings person, this is what I would say to you. Deal more in the facts of not how you felt about things, but what actually was said. Not how you felt, but so my husband left today and didn't give me a kiss on the way out. What are the facts? Well, the facts are, he was in a rush. He had an important meeting. He was really nervous about it, but I feel like he doesn't love me. Well, let's deal in the facts instead of the feelings, right? All right, that's what I would say in communication. All right, so you're having a deep conversation about this. Don't just assume they know how you feel. Speak it in love, not in anger. Choose the right timing of it, but communicating, hey, I'm not feeling very loved. Why aren't you feeling very loved? Well, because yesterday you walked out and you didn't give me a kiss. Well, the facts are, I'm sorry, honey, the facts are, I was nervous. I was about a job thing that I had going on, and those are the facts. Let's deal in the facts, not in the feelings. Now, here's what I say to the facts people. This is what I say to the facts people. I say the facts people understand that the feeling people feel a certain way about how you are doing things. So you need to understand that whenever you operate this way, they feel a certain way. So the facts are they feel a certain way. So I don't know if that makes sense to you. I'm saying to the feelings people, understand the facts. To the facts people, understand that the way you view life cause people to feel a certain way. And so you've got to understand that.
Right.
And I tell people they'll try to deal in the truth of what's going on in the moment. And when you do have to deal with the truth, do it in love and kindness with tact.
Right. I think perspective is a huge thing. And when it comes to speaking the love, when someone speaks the truth to you, obviously you want to do it in love. But I think from the other point of view, perspective is a huge thing. And like you said, we should look at the facts, but I think the problem mainly comes, and this is something that's changed my whole view on a lot of things, is never add your opinion to the facts. It's a fact that they left without kissing you goodbye today, but it's your opinion that they're mad at you.
Yeah.
It's a fact that they said a comment, but it's your opinion that they were trying to get at you for something. So it's our opinion that we always add to the facts that really ruin us. Life is the majority of how we respond to it, not what happens. Yeah. And so if we get the perspective and we start looking like, he sure does love me. He said that because he wants me to be a better person, or he said this because he really does care about me, or, he must have, just looking at the best of that person, not looking at, oh, well, he did this and he did that. Oh, well, maybe they're just having a rough day today. And I think if we start looking at everybody like that and having that perspective,
giving them the benefit of the doubt,
we would be such a more joyful person in general, because it's human nature to think the negative first. But if we start thinking better of people and giving them the benefit of the doubt, we're going to have such a great attitude, not only towards people in general, but to ourselves as well. Yeah. And I think it's all about perspective of how you look at things, instead of, being involved in feelings where I'm just going to get wrapped up in the opinion of what I think, instead of just giving people the benefit of the doubt.
Making assumptions based on what you're seeing and then coming to a conclusion. And that's what I'm saying about communication. Look, let's just say you are feeling a certain way about how your spouse is doing some certain things, and you may be coming to some conclusions, and you've got the wrong perspective, and you've made some assumptions. You know what you need to do? Not just assume that they will get it over time, and not being passive aggressive at how you are showing it to them, but you do need to find a time and being intentional, like Pastor Bishop just said, being intentional, sitting down and saying, hey, I just want to communicate to you that, whenever you leave and or this or that, whatever the case may be, I've been feeling a certain way about that, and I'd like to talk to you about it, and I'm probably seeing it the wrong way, and the other person may not have ever even thought about, I didn't even realize I was making you feel this way, and I'm sorry. But finding a way to kind of, like you said, don't jump to the wrong conclusions. Guard yourself against it. But if you are arriving at that conclusion, hey, be honest with them about it and tell them, this is what I'm feeling, so that y'all can work it through, instead of letting it fester and cause more problems and more problems, and then you end up blowing up with a big fight later on instead of communicating.
Right. And I think, too, and I would ask you this, don't you think it takes perspective off both sides? One, going into the situation saying, okay, I'm going to speak the truth to them, but how should I say it in the way that it's in love, it's in truth, but how would I feel if they were saying it to me? Like, how should it be said? Yeah. So you're looking at it from that perspective, not just throwing truth in their face, but in a loving way, like you said, the sandwich method, whatever. But then also the other person, in the same respect, as they're hearing this truth, they're doing this and they're saying this because they love me. Yeah. If you both have that perspective, there is no telling how far that marriage can go if you're always saying they care about me, they want me to be a better person, and there should be that heart, I think, on both sides.
Well, if you know your spouse, let's keep this in the realm of a spouse relationship. If you know your spouse, if you know that your spouse is very feelings oriented, then you can kind of think about, okay, we're going to have a conversation today. All right, and I know they can feel a certain way about what's being said. So if you know that, then you can be, like you just said, be thinking beforehand about the conversation, that I want to try to see how this is going to be taken from their perspective. How might they take this so that I make sure that I speak it the right way? That would be the right way to approach it. You're right. It's exactly what you'd want to do. All right. So the principle of speaking truth, and then the last one we'll probably hit for this session. We'll pick up another one later. Is the principle of being a good listener. The principle of being a good listener. In James 1:19, it says, "Wherefore, my beloved brethren, let every man be swift to hear, slow to speak, slow to wrath." And I don't know if you realize this, but there's a difference between hearing someone and listening to someone. This is so funny because my wife and I do this sometimes because she's trying to help with our daughter. She's trying to do this. She's trying to do that. And I might be trying to talk to her about something. And I'm thinking she's hearing me and she's thinking I'm hearing you. But I'm thinking, I don't think she's really listening to what I'm saying. And so I'll say, "Honey, what did I just say?" She'll say, "Well, you just said this, 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 and this." And you know what? She can kind of get it right because she did hear what I said. But I'm thinking, I don't know that she's really actively listening. And sometimes we can do that. And I do that with people. I might be, especially when I'm counseling sometimes, they're telling me something, and I'm trying to think a step ahead. I'm trying to think about, and I'm not listening well enough because I'm thinking about what I'm going to say next or something like that. And that's not good good listening. Got to be a good listener, not just hearing, but listening to what they've got to say.
And I would say too, because a lot of times when we stop listening, when you're first married, you do a lot of listening, but as times goes on, things get monotonous. You talk about the same things. My day was this, that, and the other, and you just half-heartedly hear it. I mean, you don't really listen to what's going on. And I'm sure you have times, Miss Stacy's your outlet. So you're talking to her, okay, here's my sermon thought. Here's my all this. And so Miss Stacy's like, okay, I hear the Bible all the time. I'm just going to be that person that sits and listens. So maybe she's not listening, she's hearing it. And
become dull of hearing it.
Yeah,
right.
And so that could be the same when I'm listening to my wife or she's listening to me about the day of the same thing. How was your day? Oh, work was this, that, and the other, and you're just hearing it, because it's monotonous. I mean, that's like you said, the same with the Word of God. You start reading the Bible, and it's like, oh, I've read that verse before, or I've heard a sermon off this, or I've heard that song, Amazing Grace. Okay, that's cool, but it's all monotonous. So we're hearing it, but we're not really listening. We're not really getting those words and taking them to heart and doing something with them, I think.
Yeah, the other person is going to feel very slighted if that's the way you're approaching it. Have you ever talked to somebody and while you're talking to them, they've got that 1,000-yard stare, they're staring right through you, and you can tell that they're not really listening to you, they're thinking about yeah, you do that. You do that sometimes. I know. And that's what makes me think maybe I'm just a dull speaker.
No.
Sometimes I'm talking to people, they're just staring at me. But I think with communication, sometimes we do this. Is we think we're communicating, but what we're actually doing is, let's say while your spouse is telling you something, you're thinking about what I want to say next, especially if things are getting like deeper and we're having a hard conversation. Instead of listening to what they're trying to say to you, you're hearing them, but the whole time you're thinking about the next thing you want to say.
Yeah.
And that really doesn't produce much in the way of communicating. So I wrote some things down that I normally talk to you about, and we can go through some of these, but giving your full attention to people. So I would say stuff like, put down your phone while you're talking. Right. It would be crazy to you're having a conversation with somebody and they're looking at their phone and texting somebody, and you've got to be thinking, they're not listening to what I'm saying. They're texting somebody else while I'm talking. Yeah. Cut off the TV. It'll be crazy if I go to a restaurant with my wife and let's say there's a really good baseball game or a football game or something on, and they have TVs everywhere. So we'll have a TV up on the screen, and it's a distraction for me to want to say, I want to know what's going on the game. Yeah. Cutting those types of things off in the house or whatever, so that you're not listening to them but then checking the score or something. That's insulting to the person you're trying to talk to. Avoid wandering eyes, avoid, yawning and all the body language stuff, like sitting with a smirk on your face or not making eye contact. Things like nod, agree, make eye contact, listen to what they're saying, ask responsive questions, be interested in what they're saying when they're talking. So we don't realize that we're putting off something with even our body language when we're talking to people. So giving them your full attention and making eye contact and speaking to them and nodding like y'all are doing right now. Those types of things are all really good to helpful.
Yeah, I think I was listening to something, and they talked about, because we're so busy in our lives today, and we're good at multitasking. I understand there's a debate on whether we can really multitask or not, but we're so good at multitasking. And what multitasking is, obviously, is you pick out what's more important and you do that. At the same time, you're doing some things that are less important, but we're really good at picking out what's important and what's not. Well, because of the way we've been living our lives for the last decade or so with multitasking and trying to get these things, our brain has gotten to the point where it starts to multitask and starts to rank things as important or not important. And so it's harder for us now to fully devote our minds to something, one singular thing, because the brain is still in the mode of multitasking. And so we have to kind of prevent that when we're talking about being a listener, because sometimes when we have these conversations and we're communicating, the other person might feel like this is the most important conversation we're having in the world, but we don't. And so our brains will naturally kind of shut it down and put it low on the list. And so it's hard for us to be active listening. And so like what Pastor was saying, ask responsive questions, right? Repeat what they said to you and slightly vary it a little bit so that, they know that you're listening to them and that what they are saying is important to you, because it is. Because the goal of all these conversations, as we've said before, is to restore the relationship. Because there might have been something that has come up, that a misunderstanding, and so we're trying to figure it out. And so we just have to be careful when we're listening that we're not doing other things. Because again, you're having a conversation with somebody and they're on their phone, whatever they're doing, then you're thinking, well, they're more important than I am. And that just doesn't.
And especially with the person that, remember, we're talking about feelings and facts.
Yeah.
And the facts are, you're not really listening very well while they're talking to you. The feelings that they have is, I'm not important to you.
Yep.
And now you've got even bigger problems starting to build up in a relationship because of a breakdown in communication.
Exactly.
And you're right. That's a great point. You're saying our brains have kind of started being conditioned towards this. Can you imagine how it works even within, all of us talk about this. We're trying to sit down and pray and talk to God. But our brain is going like 50 different directions.
Yep.
And we find ourselves losing track of trying to even spend time talking to God or reading our Bible. And our brain goes into other things of what we're supposed to be doing for the day because our minds work that way. That's interesting that you brought that up. Well, that's, those are the first three that's in there. We're going to go through some of the other ones on maybe a different podcast. But again, these are questions that, if you've got questions about any of this or something that you think we can help you with or elaborate on it, let us know. We're going to try to do a series of some things that having to do with relationship, finances, building and breaking trust, selfishness, all those different types of things. We're going to go through some of those in the days to come and kind of work through them. But if you have some questions or something that you think we could be a help to you, please let us know and we'll try to get those out. But this is the Victory Vision podcast, and hopefully this has been a help to you, and you can share it with other people, and we hope to see you next time.